The bottle connected with his skull before Clara even realized she'd swung it. Glass shattered. The drunk hit the floor. And just like that, every man in the saloon turned to stare at the new girl who'd just made herself the most dangerous kind of enemy in a town where law meant nothing and memory meant everything. She was 21, alone, and had exactly zero idea how to get out of this alive. But here's the thing about Clara Whitmore. She'd never learned how to back down, even when she should have. Especially when she should have. If you want to know how a girl with a temper and a man with too much patience survived the kind of love that could have killed them both, stick around until the end. And drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach left Clara in a cloud of dust that tasted like failure. She stood in the middle of what the driver had called a town, though that seemed generous. A dozen buildings, maybe 15 if you counted the ones that looked like a strong wind might flatten them. The saloon was the biggest structure, which told her everything she needed to know about priorities here. A general store. A blacksmith. Something that might have been a church once before someone knocked half the roof off. This was it. The place her mother's cousin had written from 3 years ago. The last address Clara had to her name. She picked up her bag, everything she owned fit in one canvas sack, and started walking. The street was more dirt than road, rutted from wagon wheels and probably impassable when it rained. If it ever rained. The sun beat down like it had a personal grudge, and Clara's dress stuck to her back in a way that made her want to scream. A man on the porch of the general store watched her pass. Didn't nod. Didn't speak. Just watched. The way you'd watch a stray dog, calculating whether it might bite. Clara kept her chin up and her eyes forward. The cousin's house was supposed to be on the north edge of town. Clara had read that letter so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. If you ever need anything, you come find me. There's always room. She found the house, what was left of it. The structure had collapsed in on itself. Roof caved, walls buckled. Looked like it had been that way for a while. Grass grew up through the porch boards. The door hung at an angle, and when Clara pushed it open, she found nothing inside but rot and the smell of things long dead. No cousin, no room, no anything. Clara stood in the doorway for a long moment, breathing through her mouth, trying to make her brain work around the panic that wanted to rise up and choke her. She had $4, a bag of clothes, and nowhere to go that wasn't 1,000 miles behind her. The sun was starting to sink, painting everything orange and gold like the world was on fire. Pretty, if you were the kind of person who cared about that. Clara wasn't. She needed water and a place to sleep and some kind of plan, in that order. She walked back toward the center of town. The saloon had a trough out front where a few tired-looking horses drank. Claire considered it, then decided she wasn't quite desperate enough to share with livestock. Not yet. The general store was still open, light spilling out through the windows. Claire pushed inside and a bell jangled overhead. The man behind the counter looked up, older, weathered, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. "Help you?" "I'm looking for Margaret Reese," Claire said. "She lived on the north edge, or she did." "Died 2 winters back," the man said, no particular sympathy in his voice. "House has been empty since." Clara felt something in her chest go tight. She have any family? Anyone who might have... Just her. She was alone. Of course she was. Clara swallowed hard, tasted dust. "You know anywhere I could stay? Just for a night or two, until I figure... Boarding house burned down last year, haven't rebuilt it yet." He looked her over, not unkind, but not especially helpful either. "There's rooms above the saloon, but I wouldn't recommend them. Not for a girl alone." Clara had stayed in worse places. Probably. She couldn't think of any right now, but that didn't mean they didn't exist. "I'll manage." "Suit yourself." He turned back to whatever ledger he'd been scratching in. Conversation over. Clara bought a canteen of water with some of her precious dollars and walked out into the cooling evening. The saloon was getting louder now, voices and laughter spilling out into the street. She stood outside for a minute, gathering herself. She'd been in saloons before. You didn't grow up the way Clara had without learning how to navigate men and drink and the kind of trouble that came with both. You kept your head down. You didn't make eye contact. You got in, got what you needed, got out. She pushed through the doors. The place went quiet for about 3 seconds. Every head turned. Then the noise started up again, but different now. Aware of her, calculating. Clara walked to the bar, ignoring the stares. The bartender was a big man with scarred knuckles and a face that suggested he'd broken up more fights than he'd started, though probably not by much. "I need a room," Clara said. He looked her up and down. "You got money?" "Some. $2 a night. In advance." It was robbery, and they both knew it, but Clara didn't have the luxury of negotiating. She dug the coins out and set them on the bar. He swept them up, then jerked his head toward the stairs at the back. "Third door on the left. Lock doesn't work, so don't leave anything valuable." "Wasn't planning to." She started toward the stairs, and that's when someone grabbed her arm. Clara spun, instinct faster than thought. The man was big, drunk, grinning in a way that made her skin crawl. His breath could have stripped paint. "Where you going in such a hurry, darling?" His fingers dug into her arm hard enough to bruise. "Stay a while. Have a drink." "Let go?" Clara's voice came out flat, hard. "Don't be like that." He pulled her closer, and Clara felt the rage that lived in her chest flare hot and bright. She'd spent the last 2 weeks swallowing it down, keeping it locked behind her teeth. But she was tired and scared, and this man's hand was on her, and she was done. She grabbed the nearest bottle off the bar and swung it. The glass connected with the side of his head with a sound like a gunshot. He dropped, heavy and sudden, blood mixing with the whiskey that spilled across the floor. The saloon went silent. Clara stood there, the broken bottleneck still in her hand, breathing hard. Every eye in the place was on her now, not calculating anymore, knowing. She'd just made a very bad mistake. "That's Marty's brother," someone said from the back. Helpful. Real helpful. Clara didn't know who Marty was, but the tone suggested it mattered. She set the broken bottle down carefully, like it might explode. "He grabbed me." "Don't think Marty's going to care much about that." The speaker stepped forward, a lean man with a mean face and a gun on his hip. "You just cracked open kin." Clara's heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked around the room, searching for something, anything, an ally, an exit, a weapon better than broken glass. She found none of those things. What she found was a man leaning against the wall near the door, watching her with the kind of stillness that made you notice him, even though he wasn't doing anything worth noticing. He was tall, built like someone who worked for a living, and he had dark hair and eyes that didn't look away when she met them. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked interested, the way you'd watch a card game you weren't playing in but might join if the stakes got high enough. "She was defending herself," the man said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Doesn't seem complicated." The lean man turned, irritated. "This ain't your business, Cole." "Didn't say it was." Cole, apparently, pushed off the wall and walked forward, slow and easy, like he had all the time in the world, just pointing out what happened. "What happened is she cracked a man's skull open, after he put hands on her." Cole stopped a few feet away, close enough to matter, far enough to keep it casual. "You want to argue about the order of events? We can do that. But I was standing right here. I saw it." The lean man's jaw worked. He looked at Clara, then at Cole, then at the man still bleeding on the floor. Finally, he spat to the side. "Marty's still going to want a word with her." "Then Marty can come talk to her when he's sober enough to hear her side." Cole's voice stayed level, but there was something underneath it now. Not a threat exactly, a promise. "Until then, she's got a room upstairs. I expect she'd like to get to it." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then the lean man stepped back, hands up in a gesture that wasn't quite surrender but close enough. "Your funeral, Cole." "Noted." Cole turned to Clara. He didn't smile, didn't soften, just looked at her the way he'd been looking at her since this started, like he was still making up his mind about something. "You planning to stand here all night, or you want to go upstairs before this gets stupider?" Clara's throat was dry. She nodded, not trusting her voice. She walked past him, past the men still staring, past the drunk on the floor who was starting to groan and stir. Her legs felt like they might give out, but she kept them steady through sheer stubbornness. She climbed the stairs, found the third door on the left, and locked herself inside the room that didn't lock. Then she sat on the edge of the sagging bed and let herself shake. Clara didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the wall, her knife in her hand, a small folding blade that wouldn't do much against a motivated attacker, but made her feel incrementally less helpless, and listened to the sounds of the saloon below. Laughter, fighting, something that might have been singing if you were generous with the definition. Every footstep in the hall made her tense. Every creak of the floorboards outside her door had her gripping the knife tighter. Nobody came. By the time the sun started leaking through the gaps in the curtains, Clara felt hollowed out, scraped raw. She stood, stretched muscles that had gone stiff from holding still too long, and looked at herself in the cracked mirror over the wash basin. She looked like exactly what she was, a girl in over her head with no way out. The water in the basin was stale, but she splashed some on her face anyway, tried to make herself presentable. Her dress was wrinkled from sleeping in it, from not sleeping in it, and there was a spot of blood on the sleeve that she couldn't remember getting. She scrubbed at it, but it had already set. Downstairs, the saloon was nearly empty. A few men slumped over tables, sleeping off whatever they'd poured into themselves the night before. The bartender was sweeping glass into a pile, methodical and indifferent. Clara walked to the bar. "I need to find work." He didn't look up. "Most places don't hire women." "I'm not asking for most places. I'm asking what's available." He paused, leaned on his broom, finally looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. Not sympathy, but maybe recognition. "You can cook?" "Well enough. Wash dishes, clean, if I have to." He considered that. "Miller's wife runs a boarding house on the edge of town, takes in ranch hands during cattle season. She might need help. Pays terrible, but it's a roof." "Where do I find her?" He gave her directions. Clara thanked him and left before anyone else could wake up and decide last night's business wasn't finished. The Miller house was small but sturdy, painted white at some point in its past. A woman was out front, hanging laundry on a line strung between two posts. She looked up as Clara approached, shading her eyes against the sun. "Help you?" Clara stopped a respectful distance away. "I heard you might need help, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need." The woman looked her over, taking in the wrinkled dress, the tired eyes, the desperation Clara was trying hard not to show. "You the girl who hit Davy last night?" Word traveled fast. Clara lifted her chin. "He grabbed me first." "I heard that too." The woman went back to hanging sheets, brisk and efficient. "I also heard Ethan Cole vouched for you." Clara didn't know what that meant, whether it was good or bad. "I didn't ask him to." "No, I expect you didn't. Ethan doesn't do things because people ask." She pinned the last sheet, then turned back to Clara, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Ruth Miller. My husband runs cattle. During the season, we house the hands. It's filthy work, cooking, cleaning up after men who've forgotten what soap is. Pays $1 a week plus room and board." $1 a week was insulting. It was also more than Clara had. "I'll take it." Ruth nodded like she'd expected that answer. "You start now. There's a room out back. Used to be storage. It's small, but it's private. You'll take your meals with us. You cause trouble. You're gone. You steal. You're gone. You bring men around. You're gone. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." Ruth started toward the house, expecting Clara to follow. "You can call me Mrs. Miller. I'll call you... What's your name?" "Clara Whitmore." "I'll call you Clara." "Come on, then. Those hands will be back for lunch in a few hours, and the kitchen's a wreck." The work was exactly as hard as Ruth had promised. Clara spent the morning scrubbing pots, peeling potatoes, hauling water from the well, sweeping floors that seemed to generate new dirt the moment she turned her back. By the time the ranch hands came in for lunch, she was already exhausted. There were 6 of them, all sunburned and dusty and loud. They ate like they were afraid someone might steal the food off their plates, barely pausing to breathe between bites. Clara served and cleaned and tried to stay invisible. It almost worked. "You're the girl from the saloon," one of them said, grinning around a mouthful of bread. "Heard you laid out Davy with a bottle." Clara didn't answer, just picked up his empty plate. "That true?" Another hand, younger, eager. "You really crack his head open." "He'll live," Clara said shortly. "Shame," the first man laughed. "Davy's an idiot. Someone should have hit him years ago." "Ethan did once," someone else offered. "Broke his nose." That got a round of laughter, and Clara used the distraction to escape back to the kitchen. Ruth was at the stove, stirring something that smelled like beef and onions. "They giving you trouble?" "No more than expected." Ruth glanced at her, something approving in the look. "You hold your own. You'll be fine. They're loud, but they're not mean. Not like some." Clara nodded, filing that away. Not mean was a low bar, but she'd take it. The afternoon blurred into more work. More water hauled, more floors swept, more dishes washed until her hands were raw. By the time the sun started to set, Clara's whole body ached in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Ruth found her sitting on the back step, too tired to make it to her room. "You did good today." Ruth handed her a plate, leftover stew, a slice of bread. "Eat. Then get some sleep. Tomorrow's just as long." Clara took the plate, surprised by the kindness. "Thank you." Ruth waved it off. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't made it through a week." But she said it with a small smile, and Clara felt something in her chest loosen just slightly. 3 days passed in a haze of work and exhaustion. Clara learned the rhythm of the house, the temperaments of the ranch hands, the way Ruth liked things done. She kept her head down, did her job, and tried not to think about the fact that she was one mistake away from having nothing again. On the 4th day, Ethan Cole showed up. Clara was out back beating dust out of a rug when she heard Ruth call her name. She dropped the rug and walked around to the front of the house, wiping sweat from her forehead. Ethan was standing in the yard, hat in his hands, talking quietly with Ruth. He looked the same as he had in the saloon, solid, composed, like nothing in the world could rattle him. When he saw Clara, he nodded. "Miss Whitmore." Clara's guard went up immediately. "Mr. Cole. Just Cole is fine." He glanced at Ruth. "Mind if I borrow her for a minute?" Ruth looked between them, then shrugged. "Don't keep her long. She's got work." Ethan waited until Ruth went inside, then turned to Clara. "Wanted to see how you're settling." "Fine." Clara crossed her arms. "Why do you care?" He didn't flinch at the hostility in her voice. "Because you're new. Because you made an enemy on your first night. Because this town isn't kind to people without friends. I didn't ask for your help." "I know." He put his hat back on, adjusted it. "But you got it anyway. Seemed like the right thing." Clara studied him, trying to find the angle. In her experience, nobody did the right thing without wanting something in return. "What do you want?" "Nothing." He met her eyes, steady. "I work for the Bennett Ranch, about 5 miles south. If you need anything, if someone gives you trouble, you send word. I'll come." "Why?" For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, but close. "Because I've seen what happens to people in this town when they've got nobody. And you've got enough fire in you to survive, but fire burns out if it's all you've got." Clara didn't know what to say to that. She'd spent so long building walls, keeping people out, that the idea of someone offering help without strings felt wrong, dangerous. But Ethan didn't push. He just nodded, like the conversation was settled, and started to turn away. "Wait." The word came out before Clara could stop it. Ethan paused, looked back. Clara swallowed. "Thank you for the other night. You already thanked me by not getting killed." He said it so matter-of-fact that Clara almost laughed. Almost. "Take care of yourself, Miss Whitmore." He walked away, back to his horse tied at the post, and rode off without looking back. Clara stood there for a long moment, watching him go, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Ruth came back outside, drying her hands on her apron. "Ethan's a good man, one of the few around here." "He always that strange?" "Strange how?" "Helping people for no reason." Ruth smiled, small and knowing. "Ethan's got his reasons. He just doesn't advertise them." She handed Clara the rug beater. "Come on, those rugs won't clean themselves." Some. A week turned into 2. Clara fell into the routine of the Miller house, learned which hands were harmless and which ones to avoid, figured out how to make Ruth's kitchen work the way she wanted it to. She was still tired all the time, still woke up in the middle of the night, convinced something terrible was about to happen, but the sharp edge of panic had dulled slightly. She had a room, she had work, she had enough to eat. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had in a long time. And then Davy came back. Clara was in town picking up supplies Ruth needed from the general store when she saw him. He was standing outside the saloon with 2 other men, and when he spotted her, his whole face changed. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd been hoping he'd forgotten, or decided she wasn't worth the trouble, or maybe left town entirely. Apparently she'd been wrong. She kept walking, eyes forward, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. She made it about 10 feet before Davy stepped into her path. Well. His head was bandaged, and the look in his eyes was ugly. If it ain't the little girl who thinks she's tough. Clara stopped, pulse hammering. Get out of my way. Or what? You gonna hit me again? He took a step closer. You know what we do to women who hit men around here? I know what I'll do to men who grab me. Clara's hand was already moving toward the knife in her pocket, but Davy was faster. He grabbed her wrist, twisted it hard enough to make her gasp. You don't got your bottle now, do you? No, a voice said from behind Davy. But she's got me. Davy spun around, and Clara's heart lurched. Ethan Cole stood there, relaxed and unhurried, like he just happened to be passing by. But there was something in his posture, something in the way he looked at Davy, that made it very clear this wasn't a coincidence. This ain't your business, Cole. Seems like it is. Ethan's voice was calm, almost pleasant. Seeing as you're bothering someone I care about. The words hung in the air. Clara stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. Someone I care about. They'd spoken maybe twice. He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything. Davy's face went red. You're making a mistake. Maybe. Ethan took a step forward, and Davy took a step back. But I don't think so. I think you're going to let her go, and you're going to walk away, and we're going to forget this happened. And if I don't? Ethan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Then we'll find out which one of us is tougher. And Davy, I don't think you're going to like the answer. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then Davy let go of Clara's wrist and stepped back, hands up. This ain't over. Yeah, it is. Ethan's voice went flat, hard. It's over because if you touch her again, I'll break more than your nose. We clear? Davy spat to the side, glared at both of them, then turned and stalked off, his friends trailing after him. Clara stood there, breathing hard, cradling her wrist. Ethan turned to her, and the hardness in his face softened. You all right? Fine. It came out shakier than she wanted. You didn't have to. I know. He looked at her wrist, frowning. He hurt you. I've had worse. That's not an answer. Clara met his eyes, saw genuine concern there, and felt something crack open inside her chest. She'd spent so long being alone, being the only one who cared whether she lived or died, that the idea of someone else stepping in felt foreign, dangerous, necessary. I'm fine, she said again, softer this time. Thank you. Ethan nodded. Come on. I'll walk you back to the Millers. You don't have to, Bob. I know. He said it gently but firm. I'm doing it anyway. They walked in silence for a while, the sun high and brutal overhead. Clara's mind was racing, trying to figure out what Ethan wanted, what this cost her, what she'd have to give up in return. But when she glanced at him, he just looked calm. Like this was normal. Like helping her was the most ordinary thing in the world. Why'd you say that? Clara asked finally. That you cared about me. We barely know each other. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. I've been watching you since you got here. The way you carry yourself. The way you don't back down even when you should. You remind me of someone. Who? Me. About 10 years ago. He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. I came here with nothing. No family, no friends, no prospects. And I got lucky. Someone gave me a chance when they didn't have to. I figured maybe I could do the same for you. Clara swallowed hard. I don't need charity. Good. I'm not offering it. They'd reached the Miller house, and Ethan stopped at the gate. I'm offering friendship. Maybe more, if you're interested. Clara's breath caught. More? I'd like to court you, Clara Whitmore. He said it plainly, no flourish, no games. I think you're trouble, and I think you're going to make my life harder, and I don't care. I think you're worth it. Clara stared at him, utterly thrown. You're insane, probably. He smiled, and it was real this time, warm and a little crooked. But I'm also serious. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Clara standing at the gate, her heart pounding and her head spinning. Ruth found her there 5 minutes later, still frozen in place. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse. Clara turned to her wild-eyed. Ethan Cole just asked to court me. Ruth's eyebrows went up. Did he now? I barely know him. Ethan doesn't do things halfway. Ruth looked amused. What'd you say? I didn't say anything. I called him insane and he left. Ruth laughed, bright and surprised. Oh, I like you. Come on, let's get those supplies put away. And Clara? Yeah? Ethan Cole's the best man in this town. If he's interested in you, that means something. Don't dismiss it out of hand. Clara followed her inside, mind still reeling. Court her. The idea was absurd. She had nothing to offer him. No money, no family, no prospects. She was a girl with a temper and a history of bad decisions who'd been in town less than a month. But the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd stepped in, twice now, without asking for anything in return, the way he'd smiled when he called her trouble. Clara went to bed that night with her mind full of questions and no good answers, and for the first time since she'd arrived in this brutal, unforgiving town, she let herself imagine a future that wasn't just survival. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee drifting from the main house. Her body ached. It always did now, a dull throb that had become background noise, but her mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. She got dressed, splashed cold water on her face, and went to start her day. Ruth was already in the kitchen, kneading dough for biscuits. She glanced up when Clara came in. Sleep well? Well enough. Good. Because we've got a full house today. Some of the Bennett ranch hands are coming by for supper. Ethan, too, most likely. Clara's hands paused in the middle of tying her apron. He's coming here? Unless he's changed his mind about eating, yes. Ruth's tone was innocent, but her eyes gleamed with mischief. Problem? No. Clara forced herself to focus on the stove, checking the fire. No problem. The day passed in the usual blur of work, but Clara found herself glancing out the window more than necessary, watching the road. She told herself it was just to see when the hands would arrive so she'd know when to start serving. She told herself a lot of things that weren't quite true. They showed up just before sunset, 8 men on horseback, dusty and tired. Clara recognized a few of them from town, but Ethan wasn't among them. Disappointment flickered through her, which was ridiculous. She barely knew him. His presence or absence shouldn't matter. The hands washed up and filed into the dining room, talking and laughing in that easy way men did when they'd spent all day working together. Clara served them, moving efficiently between kitchen and table, keeping her head down. She was refilling water glasses when the door opened and Ethan walked in. He looked like he'd come straight from work, dusty, tired, his shirt sticking to his back with sweat. But when he saw Clara, his whole face changed. Not a smile, exactly, just a softening, a warmth that made her chest feel tight. Evening, Miss Whitmore. Evening. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. There's a seat at the end. Appreciate it. He took off his hat, hung it by the door, and joined the others. The conversation shifted to include him, and Clara went back to the kitchen, Ruth watching her with that knowing look again. You're blushing. I'm hot from the stove. Sure you are. Clara ignored her, focused on loading plates with food. When she brought them out, she made sure to set Ethan's down without meeting his eyes. Safer that way. Dinner passed in the usual chaos of men eating and talking and arguing over nothing. Clara cleared plates, refilled drinks, and tried not to be too aware of Ethan's presence at the table. It didn't work. After the meal, the hands wandered outside to smoke and talk, but Ethan stayed behind, helping Clara clear the table. You don't have to do that, Clara said. I know. He stacked plates with the ease of someone who'd done it before. But it's faster with 2. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the kitchen warm and quiet around them. Finally, Ethan spoke. Have you thought about what I said? Clara's hand stilled in the wash water. I have. And? She turned to face him, drying her hands on her apron. I don't understand why you'd want to court me. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. He set the plates down, gave her his full attention. I want you. You don't know me. Then let me. He took a step closer, and Clara's breath caught. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Clara. I'm asking for a chance to see if this, he gestured between them, could be something. Clara wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from the inevitable hurt that came from letting people in, but standing there in Ruth's kitchen, with Ethan looking at her like she was something precious and worth fighting for, she couldn't make the word come out. One chance, she said finally, but if you turn out to be insane, I'm blaming Ruth. Ethan's smile broke across his face like sunrise. Fair enough. He left with the others a few minutes later, but before he went, he caught her hand, just for a second, just long enough to squeeze her fingers, and Clara felt the warmth of it long after he'd gone. Ruth found her still standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. So? So I might be the insane one, Clara said, but I'm giving him a chance. Ruth's smile was soft, approving. Good. You deserve someone who sees you, Clara, and Ethan sees you. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she went back to washing dishes, her mind already spinning forward into a future she'd never let herself imagine before. Maybe this town wasn't just a place to survive. Maybe, just maybe, it could be a place to live. The courtship started small, which surprised Clara more than anything else. She'd expected grand gestures, the kind of thing men did when they were trying to impress, but Ethan didn't work that way. He showed up at the Miller house 3 days after their conversation in the kitchen, holding a book. Thought you might like this, he said, handing it to her. Ruth mentioned you liked to read. Clara took it, surprised. It was a novel, the cover worn but intact. Where'd you get this? Borrowed it from the Bennett Library. They've got a whole shelf nobody touches. He shifted his weight, almost shy. You can keep it as long as you want. It was such a small thing, but Clara had spent the last year with nothing, owning nothing, and the fact that he'd thought about her, remembered something Ruth had said, went out of his way to bring her this. It cracked something open inside her chest. Thank you, she said, and meant it more than the words could carry. He nodded, pleased. I'll come by Sunday, if that's all right. Maybe we could take a walk. I'd like that. Sunday came with clear skies and heat that made the air shimmer. Clara wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and tried not to feel self-conscious about the way it pulled tight across her shoulders. She'd grown up hard. All sharp angles and lean muscle, and delicate had never been a word anyone used to describe her. Ethan arrived exactly when he said he would, clean-shaven and wearing a shirt that looked like he'd actually ironed it. Ruth watched from the porch, trying and failing to hide her smile. Don't keep her out too long, Ruth called. She's got work in the morning. Yes, ma'am. They walked toward the edge of town, away from the noise and the watchful eyes. For a while, neither of them spoke. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. The silence felt easy, comfortable in a way Clara wasn't used to. Tell me something about yourself, Ethan said finally. Something true. Clara glanced at him. Like what? Anything. Where you're from, what you like, what scares you. He smiled slightly. I'm not particular. She thought about lying or deflecting or giving him something safe and shallow. But there was something in the way he asked, genuine, patient, that made her want to be honest. I'm from Ohio, she said. Small town, smaller than this. My parents died when I was 14. Fever took them both in the same week. The words came out flat, factual. She'd said them enough times that they'd lost their edge. I had an aunt who took me in, but she didn't want me. Made that real clear, so I left when I was 17 and I've been moving ever since. Ethan listened without interrupting, his face serious. That why you came here? Looking for your cousin? She was the last family I had. Or thought I had. Clara kicked at a rock, watched it skitter across the dirt. Turns out I was wrong about that too. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it better. Clara looked at him, caught off guard by the quiet anger in his voice. Not at her, for her. Like the unfairness of it personally offended him. What about you? She asked, deflecting. Where are you from? Pennsylvania. My father was a coal miner. Died in a collapse when I was 16. Ethan's voice stayed even, but Clara heard the weight underneath it. My mother tried to hold things together, but there were 5 of us and not enough money. I left to find work, send money back. By the time I'd saved enough, she was gone too. Pneumonia. Your siblings? Scattered. I don't know where most of them are now. He said it simply, but Clara heard the loss in it, the same kind of loss she carried. I came west because there was nothing left back east. Ended up here by accident more than design. They walked in silence for a while, both of them carrying the weight of everything they'd lost. It should have been depressing, but instead Clara felt something like relief. He understood. He'd lived through the kind of hard that shaped you, changed you, made you into someone who couldn't be soft anymore. We're a pair, aren't we? Clara said finally. Ethan laughed, short and surprised. Yeah, I guess we are. They walked until the sun started to sink, turning everything gold and orange. Ethan walked her back to the Miller house, and at the gate, he caught her hand. Can I see you again? Clara looked at their joined hands, his rough and calloused, hers the same. Yes. Good. He squeezed her fingers gently, then let go. I'll come by Thursday. He did, and then again the following Sunday. And the Thursday after that, the pattern settled into something that felt dangerously close to normal. Ethan would show up, and they'd walk, or sit on the porch, while Clara shelled peas or mended clothes. They talked about everything and nothing. The ranch, the town, books, the past they were both trying to outrun. Clara learned that Ethan was patient in ways that made her impatient nature stand out even more. He thought before he spoke, never rushed, never pushed. He had a quiet sense of humor that snuck up on you, dry observations that made her laugh before she realized he'd made a joke. And he was kind, not in a performative way, but in small, consistent acts that added up. He fixed the wobbly step on Ruth's porch without being asked. He brought Clara's favorite tea from the general store. He listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. It terrified her. You're going to ruin this, Clara told herself one night, lying in her small room, staring at the ceiling. You're going to do something stupid and ruin it. But weeks passed, and she didn't. Ethan kept showing up, steady as sunrise, and Clara kept letting him in, inch by careful inch. The town noticed, of course. People talked. Some of it was harmless speculation, some of it less so. Clara heard the whispers when she walked through town about how she'd trapped him, or how he was wasting his time on a girl with nothing to offer. She tried not to let it bother her. Mostly failed. People are talking, she told Ethan one evening. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and the words came out sharper than she meant them to. Let them. It doesn't bother you? Why would it? Ethan looked genuinely puzzled. I know what's true. You know what's true. What do I care what strangers think? Clara wanted to believe that, wanted to have that kind of confidence. But she'd spent too long being judged, being found wanting, to shake it off easily. What if they're right? The question slipped out before she could stop it. What if I'm not? What if this is a mistake? Ethan turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Clara, look at me. She did, reluctantly. I don't make mistakes like this. I don't court women I'm not serious about. I don't spend my time on people I don't care about. His voice was firm, certain. You think you're not enough? You're wrong. You're more than enough. He stopped, like he'd said too much, and Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. I'm what? You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. He said it quietly, almost shy. And if you can't see that yet, I'll just have to keep showing you until you do. Clara's throat went tight. She'd spent so long being unwanted, being the girl people tolerated at best, that hearing someone say she was wanted, that she was everything, felt impossible. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't need you to be anything but yourself. Ethan reached over, took her hand. That's all I've ever wanted. Clara looked at their joined hands, felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. She thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways she could mess it up, all the reasons she should pull away and protect herself before it was too late. Then she thought about the way he looked at her, the way he showed up, the way he made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she deserved something good. Okay, she said softly. Okay? Okay, I'll stop waiting for you to leave. I'll try to believe you mean it. Ethan smiled, slow and warm. That's all I'm asking. He kissed her hand, gentle and deliberate, and Clara felt the gesture settle into her bones like a promise. 3 months into their courtship, Clara realized she was in love with him. It wasn't a dramatic realization. There was no lightning bolt, no sudden clarity. It was quieter than that, a slow accumulation of moments that added up to something undeniable. It was the way he remembered she hated coffee but loved tea, the way he walked on the outside when they were on the street, like he could shield her from whatever might come, the way he listened to her stories about growing up, about losing her parents, about all the hard years after, and never once made her feel like her pain was too much. It was the way he made her laugh, the way he challenged her when she was being stubborn, the way he stayed calm when she got angry, not dismissing her feelings but not feeding them either. It was the way he looked at her, like she was worth looking at, worth knowing, worth keeping. She didn't tell him, not yet. The words felt too big, too dangerous, but she thought about it constantly, the knowledge sitting warm and terrifying in her chest. Ruth noticed, of course. "You're in love with him," Ruth said one morning, matter of fact, while they were kneading bread. Clara nearly dropped the dough. "What?" "Don't play dumb. You get this look on your face when he's around, like he hung the moon and you're still trying to figure out how he did it." Clara felt her face heat. "I don't—" "Yes, you do." Ruth's voice was kind. "And there's nothing wrong with that, Clara. He's a good man. He loves you too, in case you're wondering." "He hasn't said—" "He doesn't have to. It's in everything he does." Ruth shaped her dough into a loaf, efficient and sure. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Claire didn't have an answer, not yet. But a week later, sitting with Ethan by the creek that ran behind the Miller property, watching the water catch the late afternoon light, the words came out on their own. "I love you." Ethan went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "Say that again. I love you." It was easier the second time, like the words had been waiting to be said. "I don't know when it happened, and I don't know if it's smart, but it's true. I love you." Ethan's face did something complicated, relief and joy, and something that looked almost like pain. "Clara, you don't have to say it back," she said quickly. "I just needed you to know. Stop talking." He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite the roughness of his palms. "I love you too. I've loved you since the night you hit Davy with that bottle and looked at the whole saloon like you'd do it again if you had to." Clara laughed, surprised and breathless. "That's a terrible reason to fall in love with someone?" "Maybe, but it's true." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. When he pulled back, his expression was serious. "Marry me." Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. I know it's fast, I know we've only been courting a few months, but I don't need more time to know you're what I want. You're who I want." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, achingly tender. "Marry me, Clara." Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too fast, too risky, too much. They barely knew each other. She had nothing to bring to a marriage. This was exactly the kind of impulsive decision that had gotten her in trouble her whole life. But when she looked at Ethan, at the hope and certainty in his eyes, all those rational arguments fell away. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you. Ethan kissed her again, deeper this time, and Clara felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, terrified and exhilarated and more certain than she'd ever been about anything. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have a ring yet," he said. "I'll get you one, I promise, but—" "I don't need a ring." Clara's hands were shaking. "I just need you." "You have me. You've had me since the beginning." They sat by the creek until the sun set, talking about the future in whispers and half-formed plans. A small wedding, nothing fancy. They'd live at the Bennett Ranch until they could afford their own place. It wouldn't be easy, but they'd make it work. Clara felt like she was in a dream, the kind where everything was too good to be true, and you woke up just before it got real. But when Ethan walked her back to the Miller house that evening, and Ruth took one look at their faces and burst into delighted laughter, Clara realized this wasn't a dream. This was her life, improbable and terrifying and more than she'd ever dared to hope for. News of their engagement spread through town faster than Clara expected. Some people were genuinely happy for them. Others were skeptical, wondering what Ethan saw in the orphan girl with nothing to her name. Clara tried not to care. Mostly succeeded. The wedding was planned for 3 weeks out, which felt simultaneously too soon and not soon enough. Ruth helped Clara with the details, such as they were. There would be a small ceremony at the Bennett Ranch, just a few friends and the ranch hands. Clara would wear the nicest dress she had, and Ruth would make a cake, and that would be enough. It had to be enough. Clara didn't have the money or the connections for anything more. But 2 days before the wedding, everything went wrong. Clara was in town picking up fabric Ruth needed for the dress she was altering when she heard shouting from the saloon. She told herself to keep walking. Whatever was happening wasn't her business. Then she heard Ethan's voice, sharp and angry, in a way she'd never heard before. Clara's feet changed direction before her brain caught up. The saloon was packed. Men crowded around something Clara couldn't see. She pushed through, ignoring the protests, until she reached the center. Ethan was there, facing off against Marty, Davy's brother, the one who'd been out of town when Clara had hit Davy. He was bigger than his brother, meaner looking, and from the tension in the air, this had been building for a while. "You think you can just take up with some girl who attacked my brother and there won't be consequences?" Marty's voice was loud, designed to carry. "You think you're special, Cole?" "I think your brother put his hands on her first." Ethan's voice was controlled, but Clara could see the anger in the set of his shoulders. "And I think if he'd kept them to himself, none of this would have happened. She's a liar and a troublemaker." Marty spat to the side. "And you're a fool for tying yourself to her." "Careful." The word came out quiet, dangerous. "Or what? You gonna defend her honor?" Marty laughed, ugly and mocking. "Everyone knows what kind of girl she is. Poor little orphan, latching onto the first man stupid enough to—" Ethan hit him. It was fast, brutal, and efficient. Marty went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. He scrambled back up, swinging wild, and Ethan dodged, landing another punch that sent Marty sprawling. "Stop!" Clara pushed through the crowd, her heart in her throat. "Ethan, stop!" Ethan froze, chest heaving, his knuckles already starting to swell. When he saw Clara, something in his face cracked open. I know what he was doing. Clara grabbed his arm, pulled him back. "But you're going to get yourself hurt, or arrested, or worse, and I need you to stop." Marty was on the ground, groaning. Someone helped him up, and he glared at Ethan with pure hatred. "This isn't over," Marty said, wiping blood from his face. "Yeah, it is." Ethan's voice was steel. "You come near her, you talk about her, you even look at her wrong, and I won't stop next time. We clear?" Marty didn't answer, just turned and shoved his way out of the saloon, his friends following. The crowd dispersed slowly, and Clara pulled Ethan outside into the harsh sunlight. His hand was bleeding, knuckles split, and she felt a surge of anger and fear and something close to despair. "What were you thinking?" Her voice came out sharper than she meant it to. "You could have been killed." "He was talking about you like you were—" Ethan stopped, jaw working. "I couldn't let him." "So you hit him? In front of half the town?" "What was I supposed to do, Clara? Stand there and let him—" "Yes!" The word exploded out of her. "Yes, you were supposed to let it go, because words don't matter, and getting yourself killed over my reputation is the stupidest thing you could possibly do." Ethan stared at her, something like hurt flashing across his face. "Your reputation matters to me. More than your life? If it means protecting you, yes." Clara wanted to scream or cry, or both. Instead, she grabbed his damaged hand, gentle despite her anger, and started walking toward the doctor's office. "You're an idiot," she said. "I know. A stubborn, reckless idiot. I know that too. And I love you anyway, which makes me just as stupid." Ethan stopped walking, pulled her around to face him. His eyes were intense, searching. "I'm sorry I scared you, but I'm not sorry for defending you." "I don't need defending. I know, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's part of this, Clara. Part of us." His good hand cupped her face. "I'm going to stand up for you. I'm going to fight for you, and I'm not going to apologize for it." Clara felt something in her chest twist and break and reform into something new. She'd spent her whole life fighting her own battles, standing alone, never expecting anyone to have her back. The idea that someone would, that Ethan would, was overwhelming. "Your hand is bleeding," she said finally, because she didn't know how to say everything else she was feeling. "I know. You're dragging me to the doctor." "Yes, I am." They started walking again, and Clara kept her grip on his wrist, anchoring him. The doctor cleaned and bandaged Ethan's hand, tisking over the damage but not asking questions. Small towns had their own codes, and what happened in the saloon stayed in the saloon. By the time they left, the sun was starting to set. Ethan walked Clara back to the Miller house, neither of them talking. At the gate, he stopped. "I meant what I said. I'm going to protect you, even if you don't think you need it." Clara looked up at him, at this man who'd chosen her despite all the reasons he shouldn't have, and felt her defenses crack a little wider. I know, just try not to get killed doing it. I'll do my best. He kissed her goodnight, careful with his bandaged hand, and Clara watched him walk away, feeling like something fundamental had shifted between them. 2 days later, they got married. The ceremony was simple, held in the main room of the ranch house with about 20 people in attendance. Clara wore a dress Ruth had altered, pale blue cotton that fit better than anything she'd ever owned. Ethan wore his best shirt and actually combed his hair, and when Clara walked in and saw him waiting for her, she forgot how to breathe. The vows were short, traditional. But when Ethan said "I do," looking at her like she was the only person in the world, Clara felt it in her bones. When it was her turn, her voice shook. "I do." They kissed, and someone cheered, and Clara was married. Married. To Ethan Cole. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. The celebration afterward was loud and cheerful, the ranch hands clearly delighted to have an excuse to drink and eat Ruth's cooking. Clara found herself pulled into conversations, congratulated by people she barely knew, accepted in a way she'd never experienced before. It was overwhelming. Good, but overwhelming. Ethan found her outside, taking a breath in the cool evening air. "You all right?" "Yeah, just needed a minute." She turned to him, this man who was now her husband, and felt a flutter of nerves. "This is real, right? I didn't imagine it?" "It's real." He took her hand, the bandaged one, and Clara noticed he'd been careful all day not to use it too much. "You're stuck with me now." "Good." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, solid and warm. "I don't want to be unstuck." They stood like that for a while. The noise of the party drifting out from inside, the stars beginning to appear overhead. Clara thought about how fast everything had happened, how improbable this all was. 3 months ago, she'd been alone, desperate, with nothing to her name but anger and survival instinct. Now she was married, had a home, had someone who loved her enough to fight for her. It should have felt fragile. Instead, it felt like the first solid thing she'd ever held on to. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked quietly. "That I'm terrified I'm going to wake up and this will all be gone." "It won't be." He said it with such certainty that Clara almost believed him. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." Clara tipped her head back to look at him. "Promise?" "Promise." He kissed her, slow and thorough, and Clara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found a place to belong. The party wound down eventually, and the guests drifted away. Ruth hugged Clara tight, whispered something about being happy for her, and left with her husband. The ranch hands disappeared to the bunkhouse, still laughing and singing, and then it was just Clara and Ethan standing in the ranch house that was now, somehow, her home. "You want to see the room?" Ethan asked, almost shy. "Our room?" "Yeah, our room." He led her down a hallway to a door at the end. The room inside was small but clean, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the range. Someone, probably Ruth, had put fresh flowers on the windowsill. Clara stood in the doorway, taking it in. This was hers now. Theirs. A space that belonged to them, where they'd build a life together. "It's not much," Ethan said, misreading her silence. "But we can fix it up, make it—" "It's perfect." Clara turned to him, meaning it. "It's more than I ever thought I'd have." Ethan's expression softened. He crossed to her, took her hands. "You deserve more than this, more than I can give you right now, but I'm going to work for it, Clara. I'm going to give you everything I can." "I don't need everything. I just need you. You have me." He said it simply, like it was the easiest truth in the world. "For as long as you want me." "Forever, then." "Forever works." They kissed, and it felt different than all the other times, more serious, weighted with promises and futures and the reality of what they'd just committed to. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I've never done this before," Clara admitted, feeling suddenly vulnerable. "Any of this." "Neither have I." Ethan touched her face, gentle. "We'll figure it out together." And they did. Slowly, carefully, with more laughter than Clara expected and a tenderness that made her chest ache. Ethan was patient, attentive, making sure she was all right every step of the way. And when it was over, they lay tangled together in the dark, Clara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly. "Better than okay." Clara traced patterns on his skin, marveling at the fact that she was allowed to do this now, that he was hers. I love you. I love you too. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow starts early. She did, wrapped in his arms, feeling safer than she'd felt in years. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through the window and dragging Clara into wakefulness. She blinked, disoriented, until she remembered where she was, who she was with. Ethan was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Morning, he said. Morning. Claire's voice was rough with sleep. How long have you been awake? A while. I like watching you sleep. That's creepy. Probably. He grinned, unrepentant. But you're my wife now, so you're stuck with my creepy habits. Wife. The word still felt strange, too big for her to wrap her mind around, but when Ethan kissed her, soft and sweet, it started to feel a little more real. They got up eventually, getting dressed and facing the day. Clara helped Ethan with the morning chores, learning the rhythms of ranch life. It was hard work, feeding animals, hauling water, mending fences, but there was something satisfying about it, something solid. The other ranch hands treated her differently now, not like an outsider, but like one of them. Ethan's wife, part of the Bennett Ranch family. It took some getting used to. A week into married life, Clara was starting to find her footing. She'd learned the routines, figured out how to manage the ranch housework alongside the outdoor chores. She and Ethan were learning each other's rhythms, the give and take of sharing space with someone else. It wasn't always smooth. Clara's temper flared when things frustrated her, and Ethan's patience sometimes felt like condescension. They argued, about small things mostly, but with an intensity that surprised both of them. But they also learned to apologize, to talk things through, to choose each other even when it was hard. One evening, after a particularly stupid fight about how to organize the kitchen, they sat on the porch in tense silence. Finally, Ethan spoke. I'm sorry. You're right. It doesn't matter where the pans go. Clara sighed. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have snapped at you. We're both learning. Yeah. Clara leaned against him, felt him relax. We're terrible at this. We'll get better. And slowly, they did. 2 months of marriage taught Clara that love didn't fix everything. It just made the hard parts worth fighting through. She was learning the ranch in ways that went deeper than chores and routines. Learning the land itself, the way the creek ran fast after rain, the places where rattlesnakes liked to hide, which pastures held grass even in the driest months. Learning the cattle, their patterns and sounds, and the particular stubbornness that made Ethan laugh and swear in equal measure. Learning Ethan, too. The way he got quiet when he was worried. The way he checked the fences twice because once wasn't enough. The way he woke before dawn without complaining every single day because the work demanded it. But she was also learning the gaps between them. The places where their histories didn't quite align, where her instinct to lash out met his instinct to withdraw. They were getting better at navigating those gaps, but some days were harder than others. Like today, Clara was in town getting supplies when she overheard 2 women talking outside the general store. She wouldn't have paid attention except she heard her own name. Poor Ethan Cole, tied to that girl. I heard she trapped him, got herself in trouble, and he felt obligated. Clara's hand tightened on her basket. She told herself to keep walking, to not give them the satisfaction. She's got a temper, that one. Mark my words, she'll make his life miserable. Clara spun around before she could stop herself. The 2 women, both older, both dressed in clothes that said they'd never worked a hard day in their lives, looked startled. You want to say that to my face? Clara's voice came out hard, sharp. The taller woman lifted her chin. We were just talking. About me. About my husband. About things that aren't any of your business. Clara took a step forward, and both women stepped back. You don't know me. You don't know him, and you sure as hell don't know what we have. There's no need to be vulgar. There's no need to gossip about people you don't know, but here we are. Clara felt her temper rising, hot and dangerous. You got something to say about me. Say it. Otherwise, keep my name out of your mouth. The shorter woman grabbed her friend's arm. Come on, Helen, let's go. They hurried off, and Clara stood there, breathing hard, feeling the stares of everyone who'd witnessed the confrontation. She forced herself to finish her shopping, head high, ignoring the whispers that followed her. By the time she got back to the ranch, her anger had cooled into something heavier. Shame, maybe. Or just exhaustion at constantly having to defend herself, prove herself, justify her existence in this town. Ethan found her in the barn, putting away supplies with more force than necessary. Heard you had words with Helen Morrison. Clara didn't turn around. News travels fast. Always does. He leaned against the stall door, watching her. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Clara, they were saying I trapped you. The words burst out, angrier than she meant them. That I got pregnant and you married me out of obligation, which is ridiculous because I'm not pregnant. And even if I was, you didn't marry me because you had to. No, I didn't. But they don't care about the truth. They just want their story. Clara shoved a sack of grain onto the shelf, heard it tear. Grain spilled everywhere. Damn it! Ethan crossed to her, took the torn sack from her hands. Leave it. I'll clean it up. I can do it. I know you can. I'm saying you don't have to. He set the sack aside, then turned back to her. What'd you say to them? I told them to mind their own business. I bet you did. There was something almost amused in his voice. You scare them, you know. Good. Clara. He waited until she looked at him. I know it bothers you, what people say, but you can't fight the whole town. Why not? Because you'll wear yourself out, and they're not worth it. He touched her face, gentle. I know who you are. You know who you are. That's what matters. Clara wanted to believe that, but she'd spent her whole life being judged, being dismissed, being told she wasn't good enough. It was hard to just let it go. I hate that they make you sound like some kind of fool for marrying me. Let them. I know what I got. Ethan's smile was small but real. I got the smartest, toughest, most infuriating woman in this territory. And she chose me. That makes me the luckiest man alive, and I don't care who knows it. Clara felt something in her chest loosen. You're supposed to say I'm beautiful. You are beautiful, but you're also a pain in the ass, and I love you anyway. She laughed despite herself, leaning into him. I love you too, even though you're annoyingly reasonable. Someone has to be. They stood like that for a while, grain scattered at their feet, the barn warm and quiet around them. Clara felt the anger drain out of her, replaced by something steadier. Ethan was right. The town could say whatever it wanted. What they had was real, and no amount of gossip could change that. But 3 days later, reality came crashing back in a way Clara wasn't prepared for. She was walking back from Ruth's house. She still visited a few times a week, helping with the heavier chores Ruth couldn't manage alone, when she heard footsteps behind her, fast, deliberate. Clara turned just as Marty stepped out from behind a building, blocking her path. Her heart kicked into overdrive, but she kept her voice steady. Get out of my way! We need to talk. Marty's face was still discolored from where Ethan had hit him, purple and yellow bruises fading slowly. About your husband. I've got nothing to say to you. Then listen. He took a step closer, and Clara's hand moved toward the knife she kept in her pocket now. Always. Cole embarrassed me, in front of the whole town. That's not something I forget. He was defending me. You want someone to be angry at your brother for putting his hands on me in the first place. I don't care about that. Marty's voice was flat, mean. I care that Cole made me look weak, and someone's got to pay for that. Clara's mouth went dry. If you touch him, I'm not going to touch him. I'm going to touch you. He moved fast, grabbing her arm and yanking her into the alley. Clara twisted, trying to break free, but Marty was bigger and stronger, and he slammed her against the wall hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Let go! Clara drove her elbow back, connected with something soft. Marty grunted but didn't release her. His hand went to her throat, squeezing. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She clawed at his hand, panic rising in a white-hot wave. This was it. This was how she died. In a dirty alley, because she'd defended herself once and men couldn't let it go. Then suddenly, Marty was gone, ripped away from her with enough force that she heard him hit the opposite wall. Clara collapsed, gasping, and looked up to see Ethan standing over Marty. His face was cold, empty in a way that made Clara's blood run ice cold. You put your hands on my wife. Ethan's voice was quiet, almost conversational. That was a mistake. Marty scrambled to his feet, reaching for something. A knife, Clara realized with horror. But Ethan was faster. He caught Marty's wrist, twisted it until the knife clattered to the ground, then hit him so hard Clara heard something crack. Marty went down and didn't get up. Ethan stood there for a moment, breathing hard, his knuckles already swelling. Then he turned to Clara, and the coldness in his face shattered. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, even though her throat ached and her back screamed where she'd hit the wall. "I'm okay." "He choked you." Ethan's hands were shaking as he touched her throat, so gentle it made Clara want to cry. "You're not okay." "I am now." She caught his hands, held them. "You got here in time. If I hadn't—" His voice broke. "If I'd been 5 minutes later." "But you weren't." Clara pulled him close, felt him wrap around her like he could shield her from everything that had already happened. "You saved me!" Someone shouted from the street. People were coming, drawn by the noise. Clara saw Ruth push through the crowd, her face pale. "What happened?" "He attacked her." Ethan didn't look away from Clara, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he did. "I want him arrested." "There's no law here, Ethan. You know that." Ruth's voice was kind but firm. "Best you can do is make sure he leaves town." "He tried to kill her." "I know." Ruth looked at Marty, still unconscious on the ground, then back at Ethan. "And everyone here saw what he did. He won't find any friends after this. But you need to get Clara home. Let me handle this." Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but Clara squeezed his hand. "She's right. I want to go home." That got through to him. He nodded, helped Clara to her feet, and kept his arm around her as they walked back to the ranch. Neither of them spoke. There was too much to say, and no words big enough to hold it. Back in their room, Ethan made Clara sit while he checked her over, his hands gentle despite the violence they'd just committed. Her throat was already bruising, finger-shaped marks dark against her skin. Ethan looked at them, and something in his face went hard. "I should have killed him." "No." Clara caught his face, made him look at her. "No, you shouldn't have, because then you'd hang, and I'd be alone, and he's not worth that. He hurt you, and you stopped him. That's enough." "It doesn't feel like enough." Clara understood. She felt it too, the rage, the helplessness, the sick knowledge that violence had almost destroyed everything. "It has to be, because we can't change what happened. We can only move forward." Ethan pulled her close, careful of her bruises, and Clara let herself be held. She was shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving her hollow and scared. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. "I really thought—" "You didn't. You're here. You're safe." Ethan's voice was fierce. "And I swear, Clara, I will never let anyone hurt you again." It was an impossible promise. They both knew it. But Clara let herself believe it anyway, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Marty's hand on her throat, felt the wall against her back, felt the panic of not being able to breathe. She'd sit up, gasping, and Ethan would be there, holding her until the fear passed. "Talk to me," he said after the third time. "Tell me what you need." "I don't know." Clara's voice was raw. "I keep thinking about what almost happened, about how close. But it didn't happen. You're here. This time. But what about next time?" The fear came pouring out, the things she'd been trying not to think about. What if you're not there? What if I'm alone and someone— Then you fight, like you always do. Ethan took her hand, pressed it against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. "But you're not alone, Clara. Not anymore. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the world wouldn't take this away from her too. But she'd lost too much, survived too many things, to believe in permanence. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. If something happens to me, if I die or leave or—" "Don't!" Ethan's voice was sharp. "Don't talk like that. I need you to promise." Clara squeezed his hand, urgent. "Promise me you'll keep going, that you won't let it destroy you, that you'll find someone else and be happy." "I'm not promising that." "Ethan, no." He sat up, pulled her around to face him. "I'm not going to promise to replace you, Clara, because you're not replaceable. You're it for me, and if something happens to you, I'll survive because that's what we do. But I won't pretend it's the same. I won't pretend anyone could take your place." Clara's throat went tight. That's not fair to you. I don't care about fair. I care about true. His hands framed her face, achingly gentle. You're my wife, my partner, the person I chose to build a life with. There is no version of my future that doesn't include you, so stop trying to write one. Clara kissed him, desperate and grateful and still terrified, but less alone in it. When they pulled apart, Ethan kept her close. We're going to be okay, he said. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but we will be. How do you know? Because we're both too stubborn to be anything else. Clara laughed, watery and exhausted. That's a terrible foundation for optimism. It's gotten us this far. She couldn't argue with that, so she let him hold her until the fear faded enough for sleep to creep in. And when she woke in the morning, Ethan was still there, solid and real and hers. Word spread about what had happened in the alley. Marty left town 2 days later, and good riddance. But the incident left Clara jumpy, hyper-aware of her surroundings in a way she hadn't been before. She carried her knife everywhere now, slept with it under her pillow, flinched at sudden movements. Ethan noticed, of course. He didn't push, just stayed close, gave her space when she needed it, and presence when she didn't. A week after the attack, he came home with something wrapped in cloth. What's that? Clara asked. Something for you. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small pistol. It's light, easy to handle. I want you to learn how to use it. Clara stared at the gun, feeling something complicated twist in her chest. You think I need this? I think you should have options. If someone comes at you again, you shouldn't have to rely on me being close enough to help. He held it out to her. This doesn't mean you're weak, Clara. It means you're prepared. Clara took the gun, felt the weight of it in her palm. Will you teach me? Every day until you're comfortable with it. So they practiced. Every afternoon, they'd go out past the barn where the sound wouldn't carry, and Ethan would teach her how to load, aim, fire. Clara's hand shook the first few times, but Ethan was patient, adjusting her grip, correcting her stance, never rushing her. After a week, she could hit the target more often than not. After 2, she felt confident enough to carry the gun on her hip when she went to town. It changed something in her. Not just the physical security of being armed, but the knowledge that she could protect herself, that she wasn't helpless, that next time, if there was a next time, she'd have a choice. You're getting good, Ethan said after she hit the target 3 times in a row. I had a good teacher. Clara reloaded, feeling the motions become second nature. Thank you for this. You don't have to thank me for keeping you safe. Yes, I do, because it's not your job to protect me. I'm not some fragile thing that needs guarding. I know that. Ethan took the gun from her, set it aside. But I'm still going to protect you when I can, not because you need it, but because I love you. There's a difference. Clara understood. It was the same reason she'd fight for him, stand beside him, refuse to let the world take him from her. Not because he was weak, but because he mattered. I love you too, she said. Even when you're overprotective and stubborn. Good, because I'm not changing. I don't want you to. They stood there in the fading light, the range behind them and the ranch ahead, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. The fear was still there, probably always would be, but it didn't control her anymore. Life found a new rhythm after that. Work and rest and the slow accumulation of days that became weeks. Clara learned to shoot, learned to manage the household accounts, learned which of the ranch hands could be trusted and which needed watching. She and Ethan found their balance, the push and pull of 2 stubborn people learning to share space and decisions and a future. It wasn't always easy. They still fought, still hit points of friction where their different natures clashed. But they were learning when to push back and when to give ground, when to be gentle and when to be honest, even if it hurt. One night, lying in bed after a particularly stupid argument about whether they needed to fix the barn roof now or wait until spring, Clara turned to Ethan. I'm sorry I'm difficult. You're not difficult. You're particular. That's just a nice word for difficult. Maybe. He pulled her closer, his chin resting on top of her head. But I knew what I was getting into. You were never going to be easy, Clara. That's part of why I love you. You love me because I'm a pain in the ass? I love you because you challenge me, because you make me think, because you don't just accept things the way they are. He was quiet for a moment. You make me better, even when you're driving me crazy. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long thinking of her sharp edges as flaws, things to be smoothed down or hidden, but Ethan saw them as features, as strengths. "You make me better too," she said softly. "You make me want to be softer, not all the time, but sometimes, in the ways that matter. I don't want you soft. I just want you to let me in." "I'm trying." "I know." He kissed the top of her head. "That's all I'm asking." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and Clara dreamed of a future where this was enough, where they grew old together on this ranch, building something that would outlast them both. But 2 months later, that dream got complicated in a way Clara wasn't prepared for. She was late. 3 weeks late, and her body felt different in ways she couldn't quite name. She told herself it was stress, or the change in diet, or any number of things that weren't what she was afraid it was. But when she threw up for the 3rd morning in a row, she couldn't deny it anymore. Clara sat on the floor of the room, her back against the bed, trying to process what this meant. A baby. She was going to have a baby. She was 21 years old, had been married less than 6 months, and she was pregnant. Terror and wonder warred in her chest. She'd never thought about children, never let herself imagine a future stable enough for them. And now here it was, growing inside her, real and unavoidable. She didn't tell Ethan right away. She needed time to wrap her mind around it first, to figure out how she felt before she had to deal with how he felt. But Ethan noticed everything, and 3 days later he cornered her in the kitchen. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Clara." He waited until she looked at him. "You've been different, distracted. If something's bothering you, I want to know." Clara took a breath, felt the weight of the secret pressing against her ribs. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Ethan's face went through several emotions too fast for Clara to track. Shock, confusion, fear, joy. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "You're sure?" "Pretty sure. I'm late. I've been sick every morning, and..." She gestured vaguely at herself. "Yeah, I'm sure." "How long have you known?" "A few days." "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara felt defensive heat rise in her chest. "Because I needed to figure out how I felt first. This is happening to my body, Ethan. I get to process it before everyone else weighs in." "I'm not everyone else. I'm your husband, the father." His voice cracked slightly. "You should have told me, maybe. But I didn't. And I'm telling you now." Clara crossed her arms, feeling exposed and vulnerable in ways she hated. "So there it is. We're having a baby." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Clara's heart hammered in her chest. What if he was angry? What if he thought it was too soon? What if... "We're having a baby." Ethan said it slowly, like he was testing the words. Then his face broke into a smile so wide it transformed him. "Clara, we're having a baby." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms, and Clara felt something in her chest crack open. "You're happy?" Her voice came out small. "I'm terrified. But yeah, I'm happy." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you?" Clara thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know. I'm scared. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know if I'll be any good at it. We'll figure it out, together." Ethan's hand moved to her stomach, tentative and wondering. "We made this. You and me. That's... Clara, that's everything." She covered his hand with hers, felt the solidity of it. "Everything's going to change." "Yeah, it is." He kissed her forehead. "But we'll handle it. We've handled everything else." Clara wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that they could navigate this the way they'd navigated everything else. But she'd never been responsible for another life before. Never had someone completely dependent on her. The weight of it was overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, the reality of the pregnancy settled in. Clara's body changed in ways that fascinated and horrified her. Her clothes didn't fit right. She was tired all the time. The smell of coffee made her want to vomit, which was a tragedy because she'd finally started to like it. Ethan hovered, solicitous in ways that made Clara want to scream. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest more, treated her like she might break. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Clara snapped one afternoon after he'd taken a bucket of water from her hands for the 3rd time. "I know. I just want to help." "You're smothering me." Ethan set the bucket down, his jaw tight. "I'm trying to take care of you." "I don't need taking care of. I need you to treat me like I'm still me, not some delicate thing that can't handle normal work. You're carrying our child, Clara. That's not normal work. It's my normal now, and I need to keep living my life or I'm going to lose my mind. Clara felt tears threaten and hated herself for it. Her emotions were all over the place lately, swinging from rage to sorrow to joy without warning. Ethan must have seen something in her face because his expression softened. Okay, I'll back off, but if you need anything, I'll tell you. I promise. Clara wiped at her eyes, frustrated. I'm sorry I'm crying. I don't know why I'm crying. It's all right. Ethan pulled her close, and Clara let herself lean into him. We're both figuring this out. I hate not knowing what I'm doing. Welcome to parenthood. From what I hear, nobody knows what they're doing. Clara laughed despite herself. That's not comforting. It's true, though. He rubbed her back, slow circles that helped settle something anxious in her chest. We're going to make mistakes, but we'll make them together, and we'll love this kid enough to make up for it. Clara hoped he was right, because in 6 months, ready or not, their life was going to change in ways neither of them could fully imagine. And there was no going back. The baby arrived on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks early, and in the middle of a rainstorm that turned the roads to mud. Clara had been having pains since dawn, but she'd convinced herself they were nothing, just her body preparing like Ruth had said it would. She kept working, hanging laundry that would never dry in this weather, peeling potatoes for dinner, ignoring the way the ache in her back was getting worse. By noon, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Ethan? Her voice came out tight, breathless. He looked up from the harness he was mending, and whatever he saw in her face made him drop it immediately. How long? Since morning. But it's getting... She gasped as another pain hit, harder this time, stealing her breath. Ethan was already moving, helping her inside, yelling for one of the hands to ride for Ruth. Clara wanted to tell him she was fine, that they had time, but another contraction hit and all she could do was hold on to him and try to breathe through it. I'm here, I've got you. Ethan's voice was steady, even though his hands were shaking. He got her to their room, helped her onto the bed. Ruth's coming. She'll know what to do. What if she doesn't get here in time? Then we'll figure it out. He said it with more confidence than Clara felt. You're strong, Clara. You can do this. Clara wanted to believe him. But as the hours crawled by and the pain got worse, she started to wonder if strength was enough. Ruth arrived soaked through, took one look at Clara, and started issuing orders. Ethan, I need hot water and clean towels. Clara, how far apart are the pains? I don't know. Close. Everything was blurring together, pain and fear and the animal instinct to make it stop. Something's wrong. It hurts too much. It's supposed to hurt. Ruth's voice was kind but firm. That's how you know it's working. Now breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Clara tried. It didn't help much, but it gave her something to focus on besides the fear that she was going to die right here, right now, before she ever got to meet her child. The afternoon bled into evening. Clara lost track of time, lost track of everything except the next breath, the next contraction, Ruth's steady voice telling her she was doing well when Clara knew she wasn't. Ethan stayed close, letting her squeeze his hand hard enough to bruise, wiping sweat from her face, whispering things she couldn't quite hear but felt anyway. I can't do this, Clara's voice broke. I can't. Yes, you can. Ruth was checking her again, brisk and efficient. You're almost there, Clara. One more good push, and you'll meet your baby. I'm tired. I know, but you're not done yet. Ruth's eyes met hers, steady and sure. One more. You can do one more. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to quit, but she could feel Ethan's hand in hers, could hear the rain on the roof, could feel her body demanding something she didn't know how to give. So she gathered what was left of her strength and pushed. The world went white at the edges. Clara heard herself screaming, heard Ruth saying something urgent, heard a sound that wasn't her own voice, then a baby crying, thin and indignant and alive. It's a girl. Ruth's voice cut through the fog. Clara, you have a daughter. Clara couldn't see through the tears, couldn't speak. Ruth was doing something, moving quickly, and then she was placing a tiny, squirming bundle on Clara's chest. Hello? Clara whispered, looking down at the impossibly small face, the dark hair plastered to a tiny skull, the eyes squeezed shut against the brightness. Hello, little one. The baby's crying quieted like she recognized Clara's voice. Clara felt something crack wide open in her chest, something she hadn't known was there until this exact moment. "She's perfect," Ethan said, his voice rough. He was crying too, Clara realized, tears streaming down his face as he looked at their daughter like she'd hung the stars. "Clara, she's perfect. She really is." Clara traced the baby's cheek with one finger, marveling at the softness. "What do we call her?" They'd argued about names for months, unable to agree on anything. But looking at her daughter now, only one name felt right. "Sarah," Clara said. "After your mother." Ethan's face did something complicated. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Clara looked up at him. "She deserves to be named for someone who would have loved her." "She would have." Ethan touched Sarah's tiny hand, and the baby's fingers wrapped around his, instinctive and trusting. "She would have loved both of you." Ruth cleaned up efficiently, checking Clara and Sarah both, making sure everything was as it should be. She showed Clara how to nurse, patient when it didn't work right away, encouraging when Clara wanted to give up. "You'll figure it out," Ruth said. "Give it time." By the time Ruth left, promising to check in tomorrow, it was full dark outside and Sarah was asleep on Clara's chest. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, watching them both with an expression Clara couldn't quite name. "What?" she asked quietly. "Nothing. Just, this is real, isn't it? We have a daughter. We really do." Clara looked down at Sarah, feeling the weight and warmth of her. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." Ethan smiled slightly, but in a good way, mostly. Clara understood. She felt it too. The overwhelming responsibility of keeping this tiny person alive, healthy, happy. The knowledge that they were completely unequipped for this and doing it anyway. "We're going to mess this up so badly," she said. "Probably, but we'll do our best." Ethan leaned over, kissed Clara's forehead, then Sarah's. "That's all we can do." Clara wanted to believe that would be enough, but as she drifted off to sleep, exhausted beyond measure, she couldn't shake the fear that one day their best wouldn't be good enough. The first few weeks were brutal in ways Clara hadn't imagined. Sarah cried constantly, day and night blurring into one endless cycle of feeding and changing and trying desperately to get a few hours of sleep. Clara's body ached everywhere, healing slowly from the trauma of birth. Her breasts were sore, her back screamed, and she was so tired she sometimes forgot what day it was. Ethan helped as much as he could, but there were things only Clara could do. And the ranch didn't stop needing attention just because they had a newborn. Cattle still needed tending, fences still needed mending, work still piled up faster than they could handle it. Clara found herself crying over nothing. Spilled milk, a torn shirt, Sarah's refusal to sleep for more than an hour at a time. She felt like she was failing at everything. Motherhood, being a wife, holding up her end of the ranch work. "I can't do this," she told Ethan one night after Sarah had been screaming for 2 hours straight. "I don't know what she wants. I fed her, changed her, held her, and she won't stop crying. Let me try." Ethan took Sarah gently, walked her around the room, humming something low and tuneless. Miraculously, Sarah quieted, her tiny body relaxing against his chest. Clara watched them, feeling something complicated twist in her chest. Gratitude that he could soothe their daughter, resentment that she couldn't, exhaustion that made everything feel heavier than it should. "You make it look easy." "It's not easy. She just needed something different." Ethan kept walking, swaying slightly. "You're doing everything right, Clara. You're just tired." "I'm always tired." "I know, but it won't always be like this. She'll get bigger, sleep longer. It'll get easier." Clara wanted to believe him, but right now in the middle of the night with her whole body aching and her mind fuzzy from lack of sleep, easier felt impossible. The next morning, Ruth showed up with food and an offer to watch Sarah for a few hours so Clara could rest. Clara almost cried with relief. "You don't have to." "I know I don't. I want to." Ruth shooed her toward the bedroom. "Sleep, Clara. Real sleep. I'll wake you if she needs you." Clara slept for 4 hours straight, the longest stretch since Sarah was born. When she woke up, she felt almost human again. She found Ruth in the kitchen, rocking Sarah and humming. "She's been an angel," Ruth said. "Ate, slept, barely fussed." Clara felt that complicated twist again. Of course she was. Ruth gave her a knowing look. "Don't do that. Don't compare yourself to me or Ethan or anyone else. You're her mother. You're the one she needs most, even when it doesn't feel like it." She cries more with me. Because she knows you'll always come. She knows you're safe. Ruth stood, passed Sarah over. Being a mother isn't about being perfect, Clara. It's about showing up every day and trying. You're doing that. That's enough. Clara looked down at Sarah, felt the now familiar weight of her. What if I'm not good at this? Then you'll get better, same as anything else. Ruth touched Clara's shoulder. Give yourself some grace. You're doing fine. After Ruth left, Clara sat with Sarah, studying her daughter's face. The dark blue eyes that hadn't settled into their final color yet. The tiny nose. The way her mouth moved even in sleep, like she was dreaming of nursing. I'm trying, Clara whispered. I know I'm not great at this yet, but I'm trying. Sarah's hand found Clara's finger, wrapped around it with surprising strength, and Clara felt something in her chest settle, just slightly. Maybe trying was enough. For now. The weeks turned into months. Sarah grew, changed, became more than just a bundle of needs and cries. She smiled at 6 weeks, a real smile that made Clara's heart flip over. She started making sounds, babbling nonsense that Ethan swore were words. She reached for things, rolled over, became a person instead of just a baby. And Clara got better at being a mother. Not perfect. There were still days when she felt like she was drowning, when Sarah cried and nothing helped, when the exhaustion felt like it would never end. But there were good days too. Days when Sarah laughed at something silly Clara did. Days when she fell asleep in Clara's arms and stayed asleep. Days when Clara looked at her daughter and felt nothing but fierce, overwhelming love. But the ranch was struggling. The work was too much for Ethan to handle alone, and Clara couldn't help the way she used to. They were behind on everything, repairs, branding, the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch running. Money was tight, tighter than Ethan liked to admit. We need to hire more help, Clara said one evening. They were going over the books, trying to figure out where they could cut costs. We can't afford it. We can't afford not to. You're working yourself to death, Ethan. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're exhausted. You barely eat. You're out there from dawn until dark, and it's still not enough. Clara set down the ledger. Something has to change. What do you want me to do, Clara? We don't have the money for another hand. We barely have enough to feed ourselves. Then we sell something. Some of the cattle. Or we sell the cattle, we don't have a ranch. We have land and nothing to show for it. Ethan's voice was sharp with frustration. I'm doing the best I can. I know that, but your best is killing you, and I'm not going to sit here and watch you work yourself into the ground. They glared at each other, both tired, both scared, both too proud to back down. Finally, Ethan looked away. I don't know what else to do. Clara softened. She crossed to him, took his hand. We figure it out, together, like we always do. What if there's nothing to figure out? What if we're just... He stopped, but Clara heard the rest of it anyway. What if we're failing? Then we fail together, but we're not there yet. Clara squeezed his hand. We've survived worse than this. Have we? Clara thought about the saloon, the alley, the 100 moments when everything could have fallen apart. Yeah, we have. Ethan pulled her close, and Clara let herself lean into him, feeling the solid weight of him. They'd figure this out. They had to. But 2 weeks later, the situation got worse. The drought had been building slowly, so gradually that Clara hadn't realized how bad it was until the creek started to dry up. The grass turned brown, brittle as old paper. The cattle started to look thin, ribs showing through their hides. We need to move them, Ethan said, staring out at the withering pasture. Find better grazing. Where? Everyone's dealing with the same thing. I don't know. But if we stay here, we're going to lose them. They talked to other ranchers, compared notes, tried to figure out a solution. Everyone was in the same boat, watching their herds suffer and their livelihoods shrink. Some people were selling, getting out while they still could. We should consider it, Clara said carefully. Selling some of the herd, using the money to get through until the drought breaks. And if it doesn't break? If this is the new normal? Ethan's jaw was tight. We sell now, we might not be able to rebuild. We don't sell, we might not have anything left to rebuild. It was the same argument, different variations, and it was tearing them apart. They snapped at each other over small things, both of them running on too little sleep and too much stress. Sarah picked up on the tension, fussed more than usual, which made everything harder. Clara felt like she was being pulled in a dozen directions at once. Sarah needed her. Ethan needed her. The ranch needed her. And she was barely keeping herself together, let alone everyone else. One night, after a particularly bad fight about money, Clara found herself sitting on the porch with Sarah asleep in her arms, crying silently into the darkness. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. They were supposed to be happy, building a life together. Instead, they were drowning, and Clara didn't know how to save them. Clara, Ethan's voice quiet behind her. She didn't turn around. I'm fine. You're crying. I'm tired. Ethan sat down beside her, and for a while they didn't speak. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. For what? For making this harder than it needs to be. For being stubborn. He stopped, took a breath. For not listening when you tell me you're scared. Clara looked at him. I am scared. I'm terrified we're going to lose everything. That we're going to fail Sarah, fail each other, fail at this whole thing we're trying to build. I'm scared too. Ethan's voice was raw. But I don't know how to admit that without feeling like I'm giving up. Being scared isn't giving up. It's being honest. Clara shifted Sarah, who made a small sound but didn't wake. We can't fix this if we're not honest about how bad it is. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay, you're right. We need to sell some of the herd, take the loss now while we can still control it. It hurt to hear him say it, to see the defeat in his face, but Clara also felt relief. They had a plan. It might not be a good plan, but it was something. How many? Half, maybe more. Enough to give us cushion through the winter and into spring. Ethan looked out at the dark pasture. If the drought breaks by then, we can rebuild. If it doesn't, we'll deal with that when we get there. They sat in silence, both of them holding onto fragile hope and each other. Sarah stirred, opened her eyes, looked up at Clara with the solemn, trusting gaze that still took Clara's breath away. She's going to be okay, right? Clara whispered. No matter what happens to the ranch, we'll keep her safe. We'll keep her safe. Ethan touched Sarah's cheek. Bah, that's the one thing I'm not worried about. We'll do whatever it takes. Clara believed him. Because that was the thing about Ethan. When he made a promise, he kept it. No matter what it cost, the cattle sale happened quickly. They got less than Clara hoped, more than Ethan feared. It was enough to keep them fed through winter, to pay for feed and repairs and the 100 small expenses that added up to survival. But it wasn't enough to make things easy. Winter came hard that year. The drought broke finally, but it broke as snow and ice instead of rain. The ranch became a frozen wasteland, everything covered in white, the work twice as brutal in the cold. Clara spent most days inside with Sarah, keeping the fire going, trying to stretch their supplies. Ethan spent most days outside, breaking ice on water troughs, checking on the remaining cattle, fighting to keep everything alive. They were both exhausted, both stretched to breaking, and one night in January they broke. It started over something stupid. Clara had forgotten to bring in firewood, and Ethan came inside to find the fire nearly out and Sarah crying from the cold. I asked you to get wood this morning. I forgot. I was dealing with Sarah all day, and I forgot. Clara was already moving, grabbing her coat. I can't do everything, Clara. I need you to handle the things inside so I can handle the things outside. You think I'm not handling things? Clara's voice went sharp. You think keeping Sarah alive and fed and warm is somehow less important than what you're doing? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Clara shoved her arms into her coat. I'm out there in the cold just as much as you are. I'm working just as hard. And I'm doing it while taking care of our daughter, which you seem to forget exists half the time. That's not fair. None of this is fair. The words exploded out of Clara. I'm 22 years old, stuck on a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere, with a baby I don't know how to take care of, and a husband who treats me like hired help instead of a partner. Ethan's face went white. Is that really what you think? I don't know what I think anymore. I'm too tired to think. Clara was crying now, angry tears that she couldn't stop. I'm tired all the time, Ethan. Tired of worrying about money, tired of being cold, tired of feeling like no matter what I do, it's not enough. Then what do you want from me? Ethan's voice was loud, frustrated. You want me to fix the weather? Make money appear? I'm doing everything I can, Clara. Everything. I want you to see me. Clara's voice cracked. I want you to notice that I'm drowning here, that I need help. that I can't keep doing this alone. You're not alone. I'm right here. But you're not. Not really. You're out there with the cattle, or you're in your head worrying about money, or you're so exhausted you can barely speak. When's the last time we actually talked? Really talked. Not just logistics and who's doing what. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't have an answer. That's what I thought. Clara grabbed the wood basket. I'll get the firewood. You take care of Sarah. She walked out into the freezing night, fury and heartbreak making her reckless. She gathered wood with shaking hands, tears freezing on her face, feeling like everything they'd built was crumbling around her. When she came back inside, Ethan was sitting on the floor with Sarah, who'd stopped crying and was reaching for his face with tiny, curious hands. He looked up when Clara entered, and the expression on his face made her stop. I'm sorry. His voice was rough. You're right. I've been so focused on keeping us afloat that I forgot to actually be here. With you. With her. Clara set down the wood, her anger draining away and leaving only exhaustion. I'm sorry too. I know you're doing your best. I need you, Ethan. Not just as someone who keeps the ranch running, but as my husband, as Sarah's father. I need you present. I know. He stood, still holding Sarah, and crossed to Clara. I'll do better. I promise. No more shutting down. No more acting like work is more important than you. Can you promise that, when everything's falling apart? I can promise to try. He shifted Sarah so he could pull Clara close. That's all I've got, but I mean it. Clara leaned into him, felt Sarah between them, and let herself believe it. They were both trying, both failing in different ways, but they were still here, still together, still fighting for this family they'd made. We're a mess, she said. Yeah, we are. Ethan kissed the top of her head. But we're our mess. Clara laughed despite herself, watery and tired. That's terrible. It's true, though. They stood like that while the fire Clara had just built began to warm the room, Sarah making small sounds between them, and Clara felt something in her chest ease. They weren't okay, but they would be, eventually. They just had to survive long enough to get there. Winter dragged on. February brought more snow. March brought thaw and mud that made everything harder. But they made it through. Day by day, argument by argument, small victory by small victory. Sarah learned to sit up on her own, started eating solid food, developed a personality that was equal parts Clara's stubbornness and Ethan's patience, which was either going to be wonderful or terrible. Probably both. And slowly, gradually, things started to improve. The grass came back when spring finally arrived. The cattle that had survived the winter looked better. The money from the sales stretched farther than Clara had hoped. They weren't out of danger yet, but they weren't drowning anymore either. One evening in early April, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch watching Sarah attempt to crawl, her determination evident in every frustrated grunt. Think she'll figure it out? Clara asked. Eventually, she's stubborn enough. Ethan smiled. Wonder where she gets that? Must be from you. Sure. We'll go with that. He took Clara's hand, threaded their fingers together. I've been thinking. About? About what you said. That I don't see you. He turned to face her. I do see you, Clara. I see you every day working yourself to exhaustion to keep us going. I see how much you sacrifice. I'm not good at saying it, at showing it. Clara squeezed his hand. You're doing better. These last few weeks you've been here. Really here. It makes a difference. Good. Because I'm going to keep trying. He paused. I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. You and Sarah, you're everything to me. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, even when you're impossible. Especially when I'm impossible. Don't push it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. They'd survived the winter, survived their mistakes and fears, and the ways they'd hurt each other. And they'd come out the other side still intact, still together, still fighting for the life they were building. Sarah finally managed to move forward, barely an inch, and immediately toppled over. She looked up at Clara and Ethan, face scrunched in determination, clearly preparing to try again. That's our girl, Ethan said softly. Clara smiled. Yeah, that's our girl. And in that moment, Watching their daughter refuse to give up, Clara understood something fundamental. This was what it meant to be a family. Not the easy moments, but the hard ones. The choosing to stay, to try, to love each other through the storms. They weren't perfect. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, built from nothing, held together by stubbornness and hope and the refusal to give up. And that was enough. Sarah turned one in March, and by then she was walking, more like stumbling with purpose, but Ethan counted it as walking. Clara baked a small cake with the last of their sugar, and they celebrated with Ruth and a few of the ranch hands who'd become something like family over the past year. Watching Sarah smash her fist into the cake, face covered in frosting, Clara felt something she'd been afraid to name. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, life was still too hard for that, but a deep, bone-level satisfaction that this was her life. These people. This place. "You look happy," Ruth said, helping Clara clean up after everyone had left. "I am, mostly." Clara wiped frosting off the table. "Is that allowed, to be happy when everything's still barely holding together?" "Happiness doesn't wait for perfect circumstances, Clara. If it did, none of us would ever feel it." Ruth handed her another rag. "You've got a good man, a beautiful daughter, and a roof over your head. That's more than most people get." Clara knew she was right. But there was still the weight of worry that never quite left. About money, about the ranch, about whether they could keep this fragile life intact. Spring came with rain that turned the brown grass green again. The cattle filled out, their ribs disappearing under healthy flesh. Ethan hired 2 temporary hands for branding season, and the work got done faster than it had in years. Money was still tight, but it wasn't desperate anymore. They weren't thriving, but they were surviving. And some days that felt like enough. Clara was hanging laundry one afternoon when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see a man she didn't recognize riding toward the house with Ethan. They dismounted, and Ethan's face was carefully neutral in a way that meant something was happening. "Clara, this is John Peterson. He owns the ranch to the north." Clara had heard of Peterson. Everyone had. He ran one of the biggest cattle operations in the territory, had money and influence and a reputation for driving hard bargains. "Ma'am?" Peterson tipped his hat. He was older, weathered, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I've been watching your operation here. You and your husband run a tight ship." Clara wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an observation. "We do our best." "I can see that, which is why I'm here with a proposition." Peterson looked between them. "I'm looking to expand, and your land borders mine. I'd like to buy you out. Fair price. Enough to set you up somewhere else with capital to spare." Clara felt her stomach drop. She looked at Ethan, but his face gave nothing away. "We're not selling," she said. "Hear me out first. I know you've had a rough few years, drought, financial strain. I'm offering you a way out, a fresh start somewhere that isn't quite so," he gestured around, "demanding." "This is our home," Clara said, voice harder now. "We've built something here. I respect that. But sometimes the smart thing is knowing when to cut your losses." Peterson pulled out a folded paper. "This is my offer. Think about it. I'll be back in a week for your answer." He handed the paper to Ethan, tipped his hat to Clara, and rode off. Clara waited until he was out of earshot. "Tell me you're not considering this." "I don't know." Ethan unfolded the paper and Clara saw his eyebrows rise. "Clara, this is a lot of money." "I don't care. We're not selling. We should at least discuss it." "There's nothing to discuss." Clara's temper flared, hot and immediate. "This is our land, our ranch. We fought too hard to just hand it over. And if we keep fighting and lose everything, what then?" Ethan's voice was measured, but Clara could hear the strain underneath. "This money could set us up somewhere easier, somewhere Sarah could have a better life." "Sarah's life is here. Our life is here." "Clara, no." She grabbed this paper from his hands, crumpled it. "I said no." She stormed inside, slamming the door hard enough to wake Sarah from her nap. The baby started crying, and Clara picked her up, holding her tight, while her own heart raced with fury and fear. Ethan came in a few minutes later. He didn't say anything, just started making dinner while Clara settled Sarah. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, over a tense dinner neither of them ate much of, Ethan spoke. "I'm not saying we should sell, I'm just saying we should think about it." I have thought about it, and the answer is no. Just like that? You won't even consider the possibility? What's there to consider? Clara set down her fork. We sell, we give up everything we've worked for, everything we've built. And for what? Money that'll run out eventually? A fresh start that might be just as hard somewhere else? Or it might be easier. Clara, I'm tired. I'm tired of worrying about money every single day, tired of wondering if we'll make it through the next drought, the next winter, the next disaster. His voice cracked slightly. I'm tired of feeling like I'm failing you. The words hit Clara like a slap. You're not failing me. It feels like I am. I promised you a life. And instead I've given you years of struggle and barely scraping by. I never asked for easy. Clara reached across the table, took his hand. I asked for you, for this. For us building something together, even if it's hard. But does it have to be this hard? Ethan's eyes were tired, pleading. Does Sarah have to grow up watching us fight to survive every single day? Clara didn't have an answer for that, because part of her wondered the same thing. Was her stubbornness, her refusal to give up this land, actually hurting the people she loved? 1 week, Ethan said quietly. Peterson gave us a week. Let's take it. Really think about what's best for our family. Not what we want, but what's best. Clara wanted to argue, but she could see the exhaustion in Ethan's face, the weight he'd been carrying. So she nodded. 1 week, but I'm not changing my mind. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to think about it. That week was one of the longest of Clara's life. She went through the motions of daily work, but her mind was elsewhere, turning over Peterson's offer from every angle. The money was substantial, enough to buy land somewhere with better water, easier weather, enough to hire permanent help so Ethan wouldn't work himself to death, enough to give Sarah opportunities, a real education maybe, instead of whatever they could cobble together here. But every time Clara thought about leaving, her chest went tight. This land was theirs. They'd fought for it, bled for it, built a life on it from nothing. Selling felt like admitting defeat, like saying all that struggle had been for nothing. She found Ruth in town 3 days after Peterson's visit, and the older woman took one look at Clara's face and steered her to a quiet corner of the general store. What happened? Clara told her. The offer, the money, Ethan's exhaustion, her own stubborn refusal to even consider it. Ruth listened without interrupting, then sighed. What does Ethan want? I don't know. I think part of him wants to sell, but he won't say it because he knows I'll fight him. And what do you want? To stay, to keep fighting, to not let Peterson or anyone else take what's ours. Even if it costs you everything? The question landed hard. Clara looked at Ruth, saw the concern in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean, Clara, that sometimes the thing we're fighting for isn't worth what we're sacrificing to keep it. Ruth's voice was gentle but firm. You and Ethan are barely holding on. You're exhausted. You're fighting. You're so focused on survival that you're forgetting to live. Is that what you want Sarah to grow up seeing? So you think we should sell? I think you should ask yourself what you're really fighting for. Is it the land itself? Or is it your pride? Because those are two very different things. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to give up. It's not giving up, it's choosing a different battle. Ruth squeezed her shoulder. You're the toughest person I know, Clara, but being tough doesn't mean never bending. Sometimes it means knowing when to let go of one thing so you can hold on to something more important. Clara went home with Ruth's words ringing in her head. She found Ethan in the barn, mending a saddle by lamplight. Sarah was asleep in the house, and for once they had quiet to actually talk. Can we discuss it? Clara asked. Really discuss it, without me getting angry? Ethan set down the saddle. Yeah, we can. They sat together on a hay bale, and Clara forced herself to listen. Really listen, not just wait for her turn to argue. I love this place, Ethan said. I love what we've built here. But Clara, I love you and Sarah more. And I'm watching us get ground down trying to keep this ranch going. I'm watching you work yourself sick. I'm watching Sarah grow up in a house where we're always stressed, always worried, always one bad season away from losing everything. We've survived bad seasons before. I know, but surviving isn't living. He took her hand. I want to give our daughter more than survival. I want to give her a childhood where she feels safe, where we're not always afraid of what's coming next. You think selling would give us that? I think it might. We could buy land somewhere with better resources, build something sustainable instead of just barely hanging on, actually save money instead of spending every penny we have just to make it through another month. Clara felt something in her chest start to crack. I'm scared. Of what? That if we leave, we'll lose who we are. That the struggle is what made us strong, and without it, we'll just fall apart. She wiped at her eyes, frustrated by the tears. This place is the first thing I've ever fought for and won. The first thing that felt like mine. Giving it up feels like giving up a piece of myself. Ethan pulled her close. You're not this land, Clara. You're so much more than that, and you won't lose yourself by leaving. You'll just be yourself somewhere else. How do you know? Because I've watched you be yourself in a saloon, in Ruth's kitchen, in our bedroom with Sarah. You're you no matter where we are. The place doesn't define you. You define it. Clara let herself cry, finally, all the fear and grief and stubborn pride pouring out. Ethan held her through it, steady as always, and when she finally pulled back, Clara felt lighter somehow. If we do this, she said slowly, it has to be together. Both of us choosing it, not me giving in or you forcing it. Agreed. And we find some place that feels right. Not just easy, but right. Of course. Clara took a shaky breath. Okay, let's do it. Let's sell. Saying the words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating at once. Ethan's face showed relief and sadness mixed together. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing us over my pride, and that feels right. He kissed her, soft and grateful. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to be impossible about wherever we move. I wouldn't expect anything less. They told Peterson the next day. He seemed unsurprised, like he'd known they'd take the offer all along. The paperwork took weeks to finalize, and in that time, Clara swung between certainty and doubt so many times she gave herself whiplash. But Ethan was patient. When she wanted to back out, he listened. When she cried over packing up their things, he held her. When she got angry at herself for feeling sad about leaving a place that had been so hard, he reminded her that loving something difficult didn't make her stupid. It made her human. They used part of Peterson's money to search for new land. It took 3 months of riding out to different properties, looking at options, arguing about what would work. Clara wanted water and good grass. Ethan wanted proximity to a town with a real school for Sarah. They both wanted something they could afford to build on without bankrupting themselves. They found it in late summer, a smaller spread about 60 miles east, near a growing town with actual infrastructure. The land had a creek that ran year-round, decent grazing, and a house that needed work but had good bones. What do you think? Ethan asked, watching Clara walk the property line. Clara looked out over the rolling hills, the water glinting in the afternoon sun, the trees that would provide shade in summer. It wasn't their old ranch, but it could be home. I think we could make this work. They bought it. Used the remaining money to stock it properly. Better cattle, better equipment, enough capital to hire help when they needed it. They moved in September, Sarah toddling around the new house and declaring everything mine with the certainty of a child who didn't understand how much had changed. The first few months were hard in different ways. Clara missed the familiarity of the old place, missed knowing every inch of the land. She missed Ruth, who was too far to visit easily. She missed the version of herself who'd been tougher, harder, more willing to fight impossible battles. But she also noticed other things. Ethan smiled more, laughed more, came in from work tired but not destroyed. They had enough money to save some each month, to plan for the future instead of just surviving the present. Sarah had space to run and explore without Clara constantly worrying she'd get hurt or lost. And slowly, gradually, Clara started to feel like herself again. Not the version who'd arrived in that frontier town with nothing but anger and desperation. Not the version who'd fought tooth and nail just to stay alive. A new version. Still tough, still stubborn, but also softer in the places that mattered. One evening, sitting on the porch of their new house watching Sarah chase fireflies, Ethan said, "Any regrets?" Clara thought about it honestly. "Some days. I still miss the old place sometimes, the life we built there." "Me too. But I don't regret choosing this. Choosing us." She leaned into him. Ruth was right. Holding on to that land would have cost us everything. Our marriage, our sanity, maybe our lives. We were drowning. Yeah, and I was too proud to admit it. Clara watched Sarah stumble and get back up, determined to catch the glowing insects. I'm glad you pushed back. Glad you made me think instead of just react. That's what we do, balance each other out. Ethan kissed her temple. Your fire, my patience. More like my chaos, your sanity. That too. They sat in comfortable silence, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, lasting peace. Not because life was easy, it wasn't, but because they'd made a choice that put their family first. And that mattered more than any piece of land ever could. The years that followed were kinder than the ones before. Not perfect, life never was, but manageable. They built the ranch slowly, carefully, without the desperate edge that had defined their first years. They had 2 more children, both boys who inherited Clara's temper and Ethan's steady nature in equal measure. Sarah grew into a smart, fierce girl who read every book she could get her hands on and announced at age 8 that she was going to be a lawyer. Clara didn't even know if that was possible for a woman, but she encouraged it anyway. If anyone could break those barriers, it would be Sarah. Clara learned to let go of small battles, learned that being strong didn't mean never asking for help, learned that love was less about grand gestures and more about showing up day after day, choosing each other even when it was hard. Ethan learned to voice his worries before they became resentments, learned that Clara's fire wasn't something to manage but something to appreciate, learned that partnership meant sharing the weight instead of carrying it alone. They fought, still, probably always would, but they also laughed, built traditions, created a life that was theirs, messy and imperfect and real. Ruth visited when she could, getting older but no less sharp. She'd sit with Clara on the porch, watching the children play, and shake her head. You did good, Clara. We got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You made hard choices. You grew up. That's not luck. That's work. Clara supposed she was right. Growing up wasn't about age. It was about learning when to fight and when to let go, when to hold on to your pride and when to put it aside for something more important. The drought came back eventually. It always did in this part of the country. But this time they were prepared. They had savings. They had better infrastructure. They had the knowledge from their first brush with disaster and the wisdom to handle it differently. They survived it, not easily, but successfully. And when the rains finally came, Clara stood in the middle of their land, feeling the water on her face, and knew they'd made the right choice all those years ago. This place was theirs, not because they'd fought impossible odds to keep it, but because they'd chosen it deliberately, built it carefully, made it a home instead of just a battleground. Ethan found her there, soaked through and smiling. What are you doing out here?
Celebrating.
Clara grabbed his hands, pulled him into the rain. We made it, Ethan. Through everything. We made it. We did. He kissed her, wet and laughing. Though I'm not sure standing in a thunderstorm is the best way to celebrate. Probably not. But when have we ever done things the smart way? Fair point. They went inside, dried off, and sat with their children while the storm raged outside. Sarah read to her brothers, her voice confident and clear. The boys argued over some toy in the way siblings did, and Clara and Ethan watched it all holding hands, knowing they'd gotten here through luck and work and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. The years continued to pass. The children grew. Sarah did become a lawyer, shocking everyone except Clara. The boys took over more of the ranch work as Ethan slowed down, his body finally showing the years of hard labor. Clara aged too, but she did it with less fear than she'd lived most of her life. She'd survived too much to be afraid of getting older. Each line on her face was earned. Each gray hair was a year she'd made it through. When Sarah got married at 24 to a man who looked at her the way Ethan had looked at Clara in that saloon all those years ago, Clara cried through the whole ceremony. You okay? Ethan asked, handing her a handkerchief. I'm fine. Just, she's so young. You were younger. I know, that's what scares me. Clara watched Sarah laugh at something her new husband said. What if it's too hard? What if they don't make it? Then they'll figure it out, like we did. Ethan pulled her close. You can't protect her from hard things, Clara. You can just love her through them. Clara knew he was right. But watching her daughter start down the same uncertain road she'd walked was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. Sarah and her husband moved east, to a city where she could practice law. The boys stayed on the ranch, both of them finding wives and starting families of their own. And suddenly Clara and Ethan's house was full of grandchildren, noise and chaos and life. Ethan started slowing down more noticeably when he was in his 60s. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual winding down. He couldn't work the long hours anymore. Got tired easier. Started letting the boys handle more of the decisions. Clara noticed every change, cataloged every new limitation, and felt time pressing down in a way it never had before. They'd built a life together, raised children, created something lasting. But nothing lasted forever, and she could feel the end approaching like a storm on the horizon. "Stop looking at me like that," Ethan said one evening. They were alone for once, the grandchildren gone home, the house quiet. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to memorize me." His voice was gentle. "I'm not going anywhere yet. But you will eventually. We both will." "Yeah, eventually." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite everything else. "But not today. Today we're still here." Clara nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't know how to do this without you." "You do. You've always known how to survive." "Surviving isn't the same as living. You taught me that. Then you'll have to remember it after I'm gone." Ethan's eyes were serious now. "You'll have to keep living, Clara. For the kids. For the grandkids. For yourself." "I don't want to." "I know. But you will. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. And strength isn't just about fighting. It's about enduring, continuing, choosing to get up every morning even when it hurts." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Promise me you'll stay as long as you can." "I promise. Every day I get with you is a gift. I'm not wasting a single one." He kept that promise for 3 more years. 3 years of slow mornings and quiet evenings, of watching their family grow, of holding hands and sharing the history only they remembered. Then one morning in late spring, Clara woke up and Ethan didn't. The grief was a physical thing, crushing and absolute. Clara felt like she couldn't breathe around it, couldn't think, couldn't function. Her children held her up through the funeral, through the endless stream of people offering condolences, through the first terrible days of learning how to exist in a world without him. Sarah stayed for 2 weeks, sleeping in her old room, helping with the small tasks Clara couldn't manage. The boys took over the ranch completely, not asking, just doing. And slowly, impossibly, Clara found her footing again. It wasn't easy. There were days she didn't want to get out of bed. Days when the silence in the house felt like it would suffocate her. Days when she'd start to tell Ethan something before remembering he wasn't there to hear it. But she kept going. Because he'd asked her to. Because their children needed her. Because giving up had never been in her nature. She started going through old things, sorting through the life they'd built. She found the letter from her mother's cousin, the one that had brought her to that frontier town so many years ago. Found the small pistol Ethan had taught her to shoot with. Found sketches Sarah had drawn as a child, toys the boys had played with, pieces of a life lived fully. In a box in the back of the closet, she found something that made her stop. A crumpled piece of paper, smoothed out and saved. Peterson's offer. The one she'd crumpled in anger, the one that had started the conversation that changed everything. Clara sat on the floor holding the paper and cried. Not from grief, though that was there too. From gratitude. That they'd made that choice. That they'd chosen each other over pride. That they'd built something beautiful from all that struggle. She thought about the girl she'd been, 21, angry, alone, hitting a drunk with a bottle and marking herself as trouble forever. That girl would never have believed this life was possible. Would never have imagined growing old with someone who loved her, raising children who turned out good, building something that would outlast her. But here she was, 73 years old, widowed but not alone, with a family that stretched across generations and a legacy that had nothing to do with land and everything to do with love. Clara put the paper back in the box and stood. Her body ached. It always did these days, but she could still move, still work, still live. She went outside, walked to the edge of their property where the creek ran clear and steady. The boys had talked about expanding, buying more land, growing the operation. Clara had told them to do whatever they thought best. This was their ranch now, their future to build. But it had started here, with her and Ethan and a choice to try. A choice to love someone impossible. A choice to keep choosing each other even when it would have been easier to walk away. Sarah visited that summer with her family. Her daughter, Clara's granddaughter, was 15, all sharp edges and fierce determination, reminded Clara of herself at that age before life had softened some of those edges. "Tell me about Grandpa," the girl said one evening. They were sitting on the porch, just the two of them, watching fireflies. Clara thought about what to say. There were 1,000 stories she could tell. The saloon, the proposal, the struggles, the victories. "He was patient," she said finally. "And I wasn't. We balanced each other out. Your grandfather taught me that being strong isn't about never bending. It's about knowing when to bend so you don't break." "Did you love him?" "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Clara's voice caught. "He saw me when no one else did. When I was just a girl with a temper and nothing to her name, he saw something worth fighting for." "Do you miss him?" "Every single day. But I'm grateful too, because I got 52 years with him, and some people never get that. Never find someone who sees them all the way through and loves them anyway." The girl was quiet for a moment. "I want that. Someone who sees me." "You'll find it. But don't settle for anything less. You're worth being seen fully, sharp edges and all." "You sound like my mom." Clara smiled. "Good. That means we raised her right." They sat in comfortable silence, 3 generations of stubborn women who'd learned that strength came in different forms. And Clara felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe? Or just the acceptance that she'd lived a life worth living. The years continued to pass. Clara got older, slower, but she stayed sharp. Watched her grandchildren grow and start families of their own. Watched the ranch expand under her son's capable hands. Watched Sarah argue cases that changed laws, that made space for women like her to exist in places they'd never been allowed before. And through it all, Clara carried Ethan with her, in the choices she made, in the way she loved her family, in the knowledge that she'd been chosen once, fully and completely, and that had made all the difference. She died at 86, in her sleep, in the house she and Ethan had built. Her children found her in the morning, peaceful, finally at rest. At her funeral, Sarah stood and told the story of how her parents met. The saloon, the bottle, the man who'd seen fire and decided it was worth protecting. "My mother taught me that being strong means knowing when to fight and when to let go," Sarah said. "My father taught me that love is a choice you make every single day. Together, they taught me that a life well lived isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, trying, choosing the people you love over and over even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Clara's granddaughter stood next to Sarah holding her daughter's hand. Clara's great-great-granddaughter, too young to remember the woman being buried, but old enough to understand that something important was happening. "They built something here," Sarah continued. "Not just a ranch, but a family, a legacy. And it started with 2 people who had nothing except each other, and the stubborn refusal to give up. That's what I want you all to remember. Not that life is easy, it isn't, but that it's worth fighting for, that love is worth choosing, that the people who see you really see you are worth holding on to with everything you have." She paused, wiping her eyes. "My mother would have hated me getting this sentimental. She'd tell me to stop talking and get back to work. So I'll just say this. Clara Whitmore Cole was the toughest person I ever knew, and the kindest, and the most human. She made mistakes. She had a temper. She was impossible sometimes. But she loved fiercely, and she built something beautiful from nothing, and that's all any of us can hope to do." They buried Clara next to Ethan, under the sky they'd both loved, on the land they'd chosen together. And as the family walked away, the youngest great-grandchild turned back, looking at the 2 graves side by side. "Who were they?" she asked her mother. "They were the beginning," her mother said, "of all of us, of everything we have. Tell me about them." And so the story got passed down, the way stories do. Changed slightly with each telling, polished and refined, but true in the ways that mattered. About a girl with a temper and a man with patience. About choosing love over pride. About building something from nothing and making it last. The ranch continued, generation after generation. The town grew around it, civilization creeping in slowly but surely. But the land remained, held by Clara and Ethan's descendants, a testament to 2 people who'd met in a saloon and decided to try. Years later, when Sarah's granddaughter was preparing to sell part of the property to fund her education, she found a box of old papers in the ranch house attic. Letters, mostly. Documents, pieces of history. And at the bottom, a crumpled paper smoothed out carefully. an offer to buy the ranch for a sum that would have changed everything. There was a note attached in Claire's handwriting, shaky with age, but still legible. We almost took this. Almost gave up because the fight seemed too hard. I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad we chose each other instead. Some things are worth the struggle, remember that. The girl sat on the dusty attic floor holding the paper and made a decision. She wouldn't sell. Not all of it. She'd find another way. Because some things were worth holding on to. Some legacies were worth protecting. Not because it was easy, but because the people who'd built it had taught her that easy wasn't the point. The point was choosing, trying, showing up every day and building something that mattered. That was the real gift Clara and Ethan had left behind. Not land or money or even their names on a family tree, but the knowledge that two people with nothing could create everything. That love was a choice that compounded over time. That struggling together was better than succeeding alone. And on a spring evening, with the sun setting over the ranch that had seen so much life, so much love, so much stubborn refusal to give up, you could almost feel them there. Clara's fire and Ethan's patience, still present in the land they'd chosen, the family they'd built, the legacy that would outlive them both. Because that's what love does, when it's real. When it's chosen every single day despite the difficulty. When it's built on seeing someone fully and loving them anyway. It doesn't just survive, it endures, it multiplies. It becomes the foundation everything else is built on. And that foundation, laid by a girl with nothing and a man who saw everything she could be, held strong. Through droughts and storms, through struggles and victories, through life and death, and the generations that followed. It held. And it always would. Because some things, once built right, last forever.